Hello and welcome. I'm your host and moderator, McKenna Campbell, and I thank you all for joining us for this evening's panel, The Regulatory Roadmap, Starting Your Career in Cannabis Regulation. Throughout the event, please feel welcome to send questions in the chat box or raise your hand if you would like to ask your question out loud. Questions that are agency specific will not be allowed. Before introducing tonight's panelists, I would like to share a little about the association. ACS is an international association of healthcare professionals on the forefront of cannabinoid medicine. Founded by physicians, ACS is uniquely positioned to advocate for the highest standards in the practice of cannabis medicine. We are an advocacy organization striving to guide lawmakers and regulators at every level of cannabis control. We also prioritize inclusivity and value having members from all walks of life, which motivates us to provide donate what you can memberships to qualifying groups. Additionally, student memberships are free. Please contact us directly if you have any questions about how you can get involved. On this next slide, you can see that there are many benefits to joining ACS. For all of ACS's constituents, we provide evidence and experience-based education and resources to support the premise that cannabis should be treated as a medicine. Certainly feel welcome to reach out to us with any questions about membership opportunities. And for our student leaders, we encourage you to learn more about our Student Ambassador Program. ACS is a nonprofit organization, and so we do rely on donations to continue our work. We appreciate any level of giving, and you can support us directly through the QR code or website link as listed in the slide. Kelsey, if you want to drop that in the chat, might be a good idea too. And now I'll be introducing our panelists. And as a note, the panelists do represent their own views and not those of the agencies at which they work. Alexis Mueller is a passionate public health educator specializing in medical cannabis science and therapeutics. Alexis is a leading voice in cannabis education with over 2 decades of experience immersed in Hawaii cannabis community. Alexis currently leads public health initiatives. Every time I say Alexis, Alexa is popping up on here. It's so fun. Alexis currently leads public health initiatives at the Hawaii State Department of Health's Office of Medical Cannabis Control and Regulation. Her work includes developing and delivering science-based education to medical providers, patients, and the general public with a focus on safe access, harm reduction, and informed decision-making. Holding a Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics from the University of Maryland, the first graduate program of its kind in the U.S., Alexis bridges the gap between cannabis science, patient empowerment, and public health. She has presented at national conferences, including the Hawaii Cannabis Expo, and has led statewide education campaigns, professional development for healthcare providers, and community engagement efforts to destigmatize cannabis use. In all of her work, Alexis centers compassion, science, and accessibility, creating trusted educational spaces for dialogue about the intersection of cannabis and mental health. And now introducing Alex Gallagher. He's a dedicated cannabis advocate with a deep commitment to destigmatizing cannabis and advancing evidence-based policies. As the former president of the Medical Cannabis Student Association at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, Alex has led numerous initiatives to bridge the gap between industry professionals, policymakers, and patients, fostering a more informed and equitable cannabis landscape. With extensive experience in cannabis operations, including extraction, quality control, and regulatory compliance, Alex possesses a unique firsthand understanding of the industry's complexities. This operational insight allows him to effectively translate the technical nuances of cannabis science into accessible, impactful education for both consumers and regulators. Beyond his work within the MCSA, Alex is passionate about reshaping the narrative around cannabis, ensuring that accurate, science-backed information reaches the broader public. He aims to empower others with the knowledge needed to make informed decisions, driving meaningful change in both policy and perception. And now introducing Alicia Schaal. She is a registered nurse and healthcare provider bridging clinical medicine and cannabis regulation. As Director of Patient Services at the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, she oversees patient advocacy, education, and licensing initiatives across the state's medical cannabis program. With over 2 decades of nursing experience, from solid organ transplant and interventional radiology to trauma and surgical services, Alicia brings a unique clinical lens to public policy. Before joining OMA, she founded Midwest Cannabis Professionals, LLC, a consulting firm focused on medical cannabis education and dispensary compliance. Alicia holds a Master of Science in Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics from the University of Maryland and dual bachelor's degrees in Nursing and Public Health from the University of St. Catherine and the University of Minnesota. Her work integrates patient safety, clinical excellence, and evidence-based cannabis policy. And now, without further ado, we can begin the questions. If anyone has a question, you are welcome to raise your hand, put it in the chat, which I will check now. And if not, we can certainly get started with some other questions that were submitted beforehand. Bueller? Okay, I'll go first. So this question's open to everyone, so we can kind of just go through one by one. What made you choose regulation and government work rather than another path? So Alexis, if you're ready, what made you choose the regulatory space?
You know, I think Gandhi says it best, and be the change you want to see. And that was really my inspiration behind wanting to pursue a job on the regulatory side. I identified a lot of gaps in, education that patients receive, education our regulators, our legislators receive. And I really just thought it would be important for me to be a part of that and bringing forth all of my expertise in education.
How about you, Alex?
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, I think the thing that drove me towards regulatory work was actually participating in the cannabis industry. I'm originally from North Carolina. North Carolina is very illegal, very much still a black market state. So I left North Carolina to go to Oregon to participate in the industry. I got to be an operations manager for an extraction lab for the better part of half a decade, and getting to participate in the sales and money driven side of the business, the production and the getting it to consumers didn't spark joy in my heart, right? There was something lacking, and I really wanted to be able to ensure that cannabis was provided to people, that it was safe for people, but just simply creating a product doesn't allow you to have that kind of broad effect. So I've decided that I was going to get out of the money part of it and get into the regulatory part of it so that I could kind of, I don't know, I like thinking it of being a referee in the industry, just making sure that everyone plays by the rules. I liked that thought, so that's why I went this way.
And Alicia, how about you?
Mine are probably a combination of the two. Like Alexis, I see a lot of the gaps. And as a nurse, then I had real issues prior to even thinking of regulatory work about the gaps, and patients were not understanding what products they should choose. There were people that were inexperienced that were guiding them, and then regulations that were being made without education or any subject matter experts. And so when the opportunity provided itself, that it was kind of a perfect blend of my background. They specifically wanted a nurse so that they could kind of infuse healthcare into their program, as well as someone that was a cannabis expert. And so I thought, well, this was kind of a beauty of an opportunity. And also, as probably most can attest, is, cannabis is a hustle industry. So, if you do not have a constant paycheck or a real job, as is usually referred, that, there's not a lot of consistent money in hustling. So I thought it was a beautiful opportunity to give it a shot. So, and I've learned a tremendous amount from all aspects, the regulation, the compliance, the science behind it, as far as opening labs. And so it just has been a really interesting experience. So, and I thought, well, I'll try most things for the experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think kind of what you all said, like just having that perspective of, I want to do a good thing out here. I want to make things safe. I want to combine my experiences. That really helps bring it together and creates a pretty good path. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, no hands raised, so I'll go back to our previously submitted questions for the next one. And this again is a question for all three, so I'll just keep it in the same order to keep it simple. What is or what are your role or roles in cannabis regulation?
So our department, our office is a little bit unique. We have a blend of our dispensary system, so regulation. All of our medical cannabis patients are providers, and then science and public health. So we're kind of all blended together. The primary roles that I have in regulation would be to produce the valid science, right? To back up why we're making these rule changes, or bringing science forth to the directors of the Department of Health, to our legislators. So kind of, again, I'm always trying to close that gap, right? And I call it informed policy. Kind of a little bit exactly what Alicia was talking about, is bringing forth the voice of the patient, of the person, but again, with a public health approach. And then kind of another role that I have, and I look at this more like personally, but is, educating patients to advocate for themselves, really giving them and hoping to give them the space where they can feel comfortable, that they can stand in front of ledge and tell their story, that they have, the tools that they need to be the voice for themselves and for other cannabis patients, because that's truly, where change is made, is on the legislative floor. And that's just a little bit of background and information, is that, in your state, legislators make laws and agencies interpret those laws. We write the rules and the guidelines for those laws. But we're not making those laws. Yes, agencies have influence, but ultimately, it does come down to the person and the constituents, and influencing their legislators to, drive forth the change that they want to see.
Awesome. Alex.
Hi again. Hi. So my role, I'm up here in Massachusetts at the Cannabis Control Commission. I'm an investigator. So my role occupies an investigatory and enforcement kind of sphere. I am responsible for a handful of licensees throughout the state, and with that responsibility, I'm to assemble teams of investigators, and we'll go sometimes announced, sometimes unannounced, sometimes for more pointed reasons, but we'll go to licensed facilities, and we'll just basically check their compliance. You can kind of think of it like a health inspector at a restaurant. Right, we're just coming in there to make sure everything is as it should be, right? We're making sure people are following the rules. Again, I likened it to being a referee. We have no skin in the game. We don't care who wins or loses. We just want to see it be played clean. So that's what we do.
Exactly. And Alicia?
So the position at OMA it was kind of a dual position. It was overseeing the patient license, actually the patient license processors, the physical process of Oklahoma has about, give or take, 325,000 medical cannabis patients. So that obviously takes quite a bit. The people that I oversaw was probably about a team of 18 that processed about 4,000 to 6,000 applications a week, just to kind of get that through. And so that obviously is a large chunk, but the main goal that I was brought to Oklahoma was to start to bring out a public health initiative, and exactly 100% what Alexis said. It is that is the one thing I learned really quickly, was that all of the cannabis organizations or agencies throughout the country, whatever their acronyms are, I think they do take the heat, is that we're making all the rules, we're cracking down, we're cracking the whip, and it is 100% that we are not making the rules and the commissions or agencies. It's a matter of you're pulling out the small little vague details that legislators put into statutes and bills and whatnot, and converting that to practical applications as best as what we can interpret, without necessarily always being able to ask those questions. And so part of that role is to be able to design education components around that narrative, and it's trying to interpret that. So part of that job was to get a physician registry up and running. Otherwise, prior to that, anyone that was a licensed physician in Oklahoma could just write and recommend whoever they wanted without any evidence of prior education. And so there were some statute changes around that. So it was instituting, what does that look like? What coursework do they need to take? And then 100% crossing your fingers and proving that, hoping that the legislators would actually give the nod, like, yeah, that sounds reasonable, we'll let you go forward with that, without kind of, crushing the soul of your work. And so it's really building out that education, because the one thing that I found, at least in the state of Oklahoma, and I don't think that that is an isolated incident, is that whether it be patients or just consumers constantly hear about seizures and illegal activity and who did we bust. And those are all imperative, important things. But what they want to know, that I found, is it's here. Now, what do I do with it? How do I find out about my 15-year-old? What do I tell them? Is it okay? Is it not okay? They want that education. And so that is that channel that I think is super important. I mean, it's, again, I think most of us could say that it's adult use is kind of on the backs of medical patients. So my goal was to make sure that they did not get forgotten.
So I think we're going to move on to the next question. And this next question was submitted earlier in the week. And the question is, what level of education is required for your job?
For the state, if you were to apply to the state of Hawaii, my job requires a bachelor's degree. It does not need to be in cannabis, obviously. Yeah, pretty much just, I think what would be beneficial if you're looking for like a public health education type of role would be having, that a public health degree. Having some understanding, of a clinician. I love Alicia's a nurse. She's bringing forth like this clinical aspect to public health and to understanding how the plant works in our body. But, to be honest, having a bachelor's degree in anything, that's the thing I love about cannabis, is it brings together people from all walks of life. So you really have a place in the cannabis industry with any background that you have. You learn to adapt to the industry or the regulatory side based off of your knowledge, and then you gain that experience.
I would totally agree.
Oh, Alicia, go ahead.
I was just saying I would totally agree. I mean, for my particular job, it was outlined to be exactly that they wanted a nurse, and ideally a bachelor's, and then for a director position, they had hoped for a master's or advanced education. I think that was beneficial. I guess I would agree. I think it depends on what area of regulatory work you're interested in doing. I had worked quite extensively with the compliance inspectors, same thing that Alan, people that were out in the field, lab people that were inspecting labs. And so they all had, exactly like Alexis said, all different backgrounds. You don't want me to run a lab, and start doing cultures. So I think it depends on what are you aiming for in that position. What area do you want? A lot of people were law enforcement and they were doing investigation and enforcement. So not necessarily as cannabis knowledgeable as some other positions would be. You need to know the rules, but you maybe don't need to know the science.
And for the investigator position, I want to say the job application just listed a bachelor's degree as a minimum. I feel like any education here in Massachusetts is appreciated. So the fact that I was pursuing a master's degree at the time that I applied probably didn't hurt. But yeah, that was all it was for investigations.
Perfect. Yeah, can confirm. So let's see. We're going to move on to the next question. And okay. What has been the most surprising or unexpected part of your job? It's a good start, Alexis. Good start.
She laughed first.
Everything. No.
Yeah.
I think personally for me, I really understanding the actual political pull behind cannabis. Unless like you are involved in ledge and you understand how lawmaking works, yeah, it was kind of a whole new world. I had luckily been in inserting myself in the policy process in the state, so I had a little inkling and idea. But I was yeah, I that was a learning curve for me for sure. I kind of a surprise, I just have to say this, is that not everybody that works in regulation is necessarily like an advocate for cannabis. And that was interesting to me. Everyone's opinion, I think, matters and is valued, because when you have someone like me working in regulation where I'm such an advocate, you know, my opinions and what I bring forth, you know, in some ways do need to be, you know, challenged or brought reason to at times, to kind of understand, because there is a bigger play happening behind the scenes that you might not be aware of. And then, you know, bringing forth like public health, right? Understanding the nuances of that, and how do we really protect patients. So yeah, I've had to kind of tweak my brain a little bit and tell myself, like, you know, cannabis is not a plant for everybody, and we're not dealing with the same plant that our ancestors consumed today, and really understanding that. So we are, you know, we are dealing with a different plant, and accepting that. And then my advice would be is, you know, you enter it with an open mind, be fluid, you know, go with the flow, in the sense that definitely make change, but don't expect that change to happen right away. You have to kind of earn your right and prove your points, and earn that.
Absolutely.
I think one of the most surprising things about the position that I've got right now is, I don't know, maybe it's less about the position, it's more about the place. So I came from Oregon. I was in Portland, Oregon for quite some time, and I moved to Massachusetts for the position with the CCC. Sight unseen, had never stepped foot into Massachusetts, never stepped foot into New England, frankly. And just had stereotypes to kind of go off of. And New England seemed like it was cold, literally, but maybe the people were a little cold too. I don't know. That was what the stereotype was like. But when I moved here, all I have received is just warmth and welcoming. And it was just a beautiful reminder that cannabis is community. And at the regulatory agency that I work with, I'm not working with a bunch of people that are, I don't know, I think in Oregon we called them cowboys, right? Where they came in, they were rough and tough and rootin' tootin', they wanted to, you know, bust your chops and shut you down. I don't know. It's kind of how it felt like. Here, everyone's just really passionate about cannabis, and you can kind of feel it when you go to work, and that's been surprising. It pleasantly so. I don't think, I don't want to say that I came here with low expectations, but everything that I came here with, all my expectations have been far superseded. It's been great. Also, the cannabis industry itself is full of really unique, diverse people, and you get to see some very creative solutions to very nuanced problems when you go on inspections to, you know, different cultivations, product manufacturers, and retails. It's just fun to see. People are creative. People are silly.
I think some of the biggest things that I found that was really interesting was, I would agree quite a bit with Alexis. Like, I was not really for sure on, you know, how A went to B, like how were legislative mandates made or statutes made, and what was a commission or an agency's response to that, and how did we how was that carried out, what were our guidelines. Then I didn't realize that we had to put rules for us that then had to be, you know, approved, and they could be not approved. And so you almost had like an extra added layer of fat to cut through, I guess, if nothing else. Not 100% autonomy for the agency to actually take it and run with it. You kind of go like, nope, we didn't mean that, we don't want to do that. So that was a little surprising to me. I also found that, you know, not everyone that I worked with was an advocate. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't think it's, I guess coming from a medical space, I've never given myself insulin. So I didn't feel that I had to have everyone else with me that was, you know, going home and being a consumer or medical patient on top of it, as long as they were there to at least do honest work to the mission, either, you know, carry out to the best of the ability to keep people safe. Because I too then saw, you know, are you out here to bust people, or are you here to help patients? Or, you know, it took a bit to kind of get everybody's angle. And I will admit there were multiple of those angles. Not everyone do I think was necessarily not an advocate, but I don't think they were the kind of advocate that the three of us would be. Obviously, to go on and pursue a master's in medical cannabis, and just so specific, you have to have some sort of determination to, empathy for the plant, right? And I just don't know that I always saw that as much, but I found it interesting. Not anything I couldn't work through, but it was interesting. And definitely you have to be fluid. I mean, you have to kind of be willing to, like you said, be patient. You're not going to get all the changes made in an afternoon, which I'm cool with, as long as there is an outlined mission. Like what are we doing here? Or is it just a matter of, cracking down on 10,000 plants in a corner that nobody knew about? So there were a lot of surprises. Interesting, right? I think really beneficial learning experiences.
Absolutely. So another question we have, it kind of focuses on stigma. So whether it's, when you're interacting with other members of the industry who maybe own a cannabis business, or even in your personal life with people outside of cannabis, do you feel like you face stigma as a cannabis regulator?
Well, absolutely. I'll be honest, I don't tell everybody what I do. I guess the cat's out of the bag now. I think there's just a stigma, unfortunately, that follows the plant, and that's kind of what I personally have dedicated my life to, is to remove that stigma. If Harry Anslinger was alive today, I would ask him for a cup of coffee and just say, "How did you do it?" Psychologically, I just want to know, because we're the opposite, right? We're just everybody, like, hear about this plant, and the movement forward can feel so slow at times, right? That there is still a stigma. But I do believe, and I've seen this, I really do see the stigma, starting to very slowly kind of melt away. And that is just feels like a breath of fresh air. And, I realized a long time ago, I am a mom. And I had moments where I didn't want to be judged. And but then I realized, I have to tell everybody what I do, because that's the part of it, is that's part of releasing the stigma. Like, I'm a parent, and I have a master's degree, and I have a regular job, and I exercise, and I eat healthy, and I have friends, and that look, and I'm a cannabis patient. I consume cannabis. And so I kind of just, tweaked my brain again, my thought process, and started to, live what I do, and let people know, like, hey, look, you don't need to have that stigma, or at least just understand that, like, as an adult, respect my choices to use this plant, just how I respect your choice to maybe have a beer or a glass of wine at the end of the night.
Absolutely. How about you, Alex? What stigma are you facing?
Y'all, I so I'm from North Carolina, right? My family's from North Carolina, and North Carolina, like I said earlier, is still illegal state. No medical framework, no adult use framework, and it just highly stigmatized. So my family, my mom specifically, boy, she is just not a fan of cannabis. Was not a fan of cannabis for a while, but I was just a loud, proud cannabis user, admittedly a black market participant so many years ago that I don't think it matters. But in North Carolina, that was you were either a black market participant or you weren't. So that was a point of shame, really. I got my family found out that I was doing drugs. I was smoking the devil, the reefer, the devil's lettuce, all the euphemisms you can think of. She was so ashamed. My mom specifically, my dad, less so. Until I got a job in Oregon in the industry, and then a point of shame became a moment of opportunity. And it was difficult for my mom to see the trajectory, but I was sold. I was sold in college that cannabis was a good thing. It helps people. It heals people. There is way more good that comes from it than bad. You can compare it against all sorts of other things. It is a good thing. I believe that in all my heart. So I moved to Oregon. Again, sight unseen. I'd never been to Portland, Oregon before. I'd never stepped foot in the Pacific Northwest, but I loved cannabis. So I believed in the mission. I went there. And I was there for about 5 years, and it went from this funny moment of my mom telling people when they asked why I moved to the West Coast, she was like, "Oh, he went to go work with biopharmaceuticals." That was what she told people. I was like, and after a while, I heard her say that. I was
Sure.
like, quit churching it up. What are you doing? I'm working in the cannabis industry. So working in the cannabis industry opened up pathways for me that I never thought were possible. Eventually, a master's degree, a literal master's of science from a respected university, offered a cannabis specific degree. I pursued that. That led me into regulation, which is now this hilarious moment where I've got family that's part of the SBI, the State Bureau of Investigation, North Carolina. They had talks with me. They set me down dare style and told me that it was a gateway drug, Alex. And now it's hilarious because my job title is the same as his. I'm an investigator for the state. I'm not part of this SBI, right? But it's still just so funny. So this thing that was like this stigmatized, pathway to criminality is now a pathway to a career. It's so funny to see the shift. So just like Alexis said, it's taken time. It's taken a lot of honest conversations, but it's my mission. I got to be loud and proud about it. I have no choice. It is who I am. It's what I believe in. So yeah, there's still stigma everywhere, but you just got to trudge through it.
I think that's great. Your path to criminality versus, to a career. That's a great, that should be your book. I think it should be a book title for you. I love it.
I'm
We'll
working
work
on it
on
right
it.
now. Yeah, yeah.
I love it. As a nurse, it was highly stigmatized. It is not, I believe pretty much in most, if not all, certainly all I've been to is that as a nurse, that is not, we are safety sensitive population. So that is not something that you can consume and still work. Doesn't really matter. They have programs for nurses if you're caught using cannabis and you find yourself on probation and in a rehab program to get your license back. So it was kind of always this undertone of, hushed conversations. I remember telling a surgeon when I was in the OR that it came up that I was doing the program and his immediate was like, does this mean you're coming to work high every day? And I thought, I mean, I guess I'm doing a good job if I am. So what's the difference? But I was not. But I see it changing in the population and people are pushing for it. So I didn't I guess I'm with the others. I didn't really care. I figured if I had to make a stand, and my attitude when anyone made comments like that was it really doesn't matter. I mean, yes, of course I have a personal opinion and I'm definitely an advocate or none of us would be here. But at the end of the day, to me, it didn't matter. This is what patients are using. This is a medicine for them. If doctors don't approve, that's really unfortunate. They don't have to have, they can secure their own personal opinions, but you cannot take care of people if you don't know the whole sum of the person. So if you aren't educating yourself on what a tremendously large population of the world and certainly in the United States are using, then you're really just kind of being ignorant to the people that you serve. And so I figured if I didn't speak about it in my community where it was hushed undertones, then what due diligence was I doing? So I guess as I've kind of secured a master's and again, respectable location. It wasn't, I know doctors that have gotten medical degrees from the Caribbean and we used to laugh, so it was a matter of like, well, this is not from the Caribbean. So it's still a respected degree and I can show you all the work that we did. But I think we just have to chip away at it. And unfortunately, I think it's like meeting in the middle. The advocates, believe in it and we're pushing for it. And we're trying to do it from an education standpoint, whereas everyone else, the patients and the public are there and they're hungry for the information to start dabbling to try to make themselves feel better because they're realizing that medications that are being pushed to them aren't always necessarily the answer. I'm not dicking, kind of dishing on pharmaceuticals, but I think there's a time and place for everything. So I think it takes educated people that are willing to make a stand and show that exactly like Alexis said, we are real people with real lives doing the same thing that you would never question me on any other day, my competency or dedication to family or work effort. And this is just one more component.
I really like that perspective. It's just one part of all the things you do and all the things you've accomplished. It's just also this.
Yeah.
So, nope, that's one way to fight the stigma. I know we definitely have education programs out there in different states that work to do that. I know there's a question in the chat about, how if we educate people about how it's used on the day-to-day for some people, I do think those programs can work. And then there was a question I'm going to kind of summarize since Alex so kindly answered it in the chat. There's a question that was specific to Alex, but this could go any state. This is from someone who works in the industry, hoping to get into compliance and having that interest. And the question being, does my industry experience, does that help me get into compliance? Is there a way to make that transition over to the dark side, as we call it sometimes? And the answer is definitely yes. Having those skills, as Alex has said before, he's worked in extraction for years in Oregon, and those skills absolutely help him. And as someone who works with Alex as well, I can tell you, if you're in an extraction room with Alex, it is a very interesting experience. And Alex is so well versed in what's going on, and has such great conversations with the people working there. So those skills are absolutely transferable. And certainly reach out to whatever regulatory agency you are looking to work at. I know the CCC does post jobs online. I'm sure other agencies do as well. And with that, I think we will move on
My
to the
one
next.
side note to that is don't always limit yourself to having to go and work for the state to take your previous audit and expect an inspection history, to just always think that you have to go to the state. You can always help other dispensaries as a compliance consultant. You can, be their compliance person for a larger chain. So regulatory, yes, absolutely. But even if you're interested in that crossing to the other side, there are still other options than just joining a state program.
Absolutely. I do feel like on inspection, we do end up speaking with people who are the compliance person. So to your point, those jobs do exist as well. Absolutely. All right, not seeing any hands up. Let's see the pre-submitted questions. Okay, so does your agency, this is for all three of you, does your agency regulate medical cannabis or adult use cannabis or both, right? So what do you kind of work with, and what are your feelings on each type of cannabis?
So currently Hawaii is a medical cannabis program only. We have the oldest medical cannabis program in the United States. It's 25 years old. It was alleged past the medical cannabis laws in 2000. We're in 2025. So we currently just regulate medical cannabis. In our state, we have 8 vertical licensees. Those would be legal dispensaries that can dispense medical cannabis. I don't know how many people on this call have been to Hawaii. I never thought that I would think this in my life, but we do. We live in a paradise. We live in a beautiful place. I'm not sure how I feel about adult use anymore, just because I have seen some of the challenges that other states have, been through. We have a lot to learn from our senior states, like California, Washington. So I know that it's probably inevitable for most states eventually, even North Carolina, Alex. I could be wrong, but we don't know. And so definitely our office would, continue being the regulatory body if we do move into adult use. It just hasn't happened yet. It's been on the ballot. Are we in, I'm gonna year 3, 4?
Yeah,
All right,
same.
Alex.
Oklahoma's medical only. However, it is a little different as far as their medical program. They do not have medical services embedded within their dispensaries. So it actually, in my opinion, functions more as an adult use program with an extra step. And so I think that's what the challenge is to bring it back to actually educating patients, especially in a medical cannabis state. It is same as like Alexis, signatures are being gathered to try and get it on the 2026 ballot, to be able to vote on adult use again. It has already been on there a couple times and voted down, just because there's such a legacy industry throughout Oklahoma. I know I talked to people on a frequent basis, just random people, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I had weed up in Oklahoma, you're from Oklahoma, up in New England and California, and it's shipping all over the place. So I think it gets, that increased stigma based on it's everywhere. However, I don't know if it's going to go. I kind of agree with Alexis. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the programs that are medical are really focusing on high doses, thinking that everyone that's coming in is palliative care or oncology patients, and really overlooking, a potential 80-year-old that has joint pain that maybe just needs a couple milligrams with some extra cannabinoids. So I think even state to state, once you say medical, that varies as well.
I just need
That's
to
a
make
great point.
one correction, sorry, because my wording came out incorrectly. Hawaii does not have a ballot process. Thank you, Wendy. It does all go through legislation. When adult use gets submitted through leg, I think I think in my head, oh, the legislators are ticking their little ballot dots. But yes, it is through the legislation process, not through the vote of the people.
And here in Massachusetts, we have both medical and adult use. That was the same as it was in Oregon. I wasn't a regulator in Oregon, but I was in the industry and just kind of hanging out, and I got to see it. It's interesting what I've seen with medical and with adult use states, right? It seems like when a state decides to go AU to go adult use, the medical program, unless there's sufficient ways to get involved or sufficient reasons, sufficient benefits for patients, they're going to go towards the adult use route. If you look at Oregon, who's done a great job at keeping track of statistics, you can look at the medical patient population from 2015, whenever they started AU out in Oregon, to now. And it started, I want to say, there's like 80,000 patients in Oregon, and now there's less than 10.
Yeah.
They're
I think
not
California is registering at 2,200.
they're not gone. In Oregon, the benefit for a patient was that you got your own line, you got higher dose products marginally, and you didn't have to pay taxes on the products. You still had to pay for the license, which was about $200, and for some patients, that's not going to outweigh the amount of tax savings that they have in a year. So they just didn't do it. And the same thing I feel like is happening here in Massachusetts. There's a significant hurdles for medical programs. So the financial incentive isn't there for businesses. The model itself for medical is a vertical integration, right? You have to have the retail, you have to have the cultivation, product manufacturing, and the license fee is pretty steep. All of those factors, I mean, it's really not a secret. All of those factors together have pushed people away from doing it. So you're starting to see a decline in medical programs and co-located facilities and medical exclusive facilities in lieu of AU. It's a bummer. It truly is. And really, you can see that with the most effect here in Massachusetts on the islands, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. The state had to get creative with how to get product to the islands over the water because there wasn't, a vertically integrated medical facility on the island that grew and that created and that sold. So what do you do?
Wow. Interesting.
It's those little things like having to transport over water that you don't think of at first, and then it's like, well, now we have these laws, and how do we go around this, or not go around, but make it possible legally? So interesting stuff. Alexis, were you just going to add something?
No,
Or
I
just agreeing?
agree with
All right.
Alec. All these little nuances that you really have to think through, and that's kind of how I think why I feel the way I do about adult use right now is have they been thought through? And Alicia mentioned it, protecting legacy growers. Lowering the barriers to entry so that businesses can have longevity and sustainability at an affordable cost. These are major decisions and things that regulators are looking at, and then you balance that out with legislators, and so it's finding that middle ground. When a state finds it, let us all know.
Yeah, we'll have to collab again. This question I think is pretty interesting that just came in. Well, came in last week, but I just saw it on my list, I should say. And it kind of speaks pretty well to this panel as you are living in different places, different climates, kind of. Question is outdoor grow allowed as like a licensed type in your state? Can you grow outdoors legally in your state?
So our licensees do not grow outdoor. It'll be in greenhouses or indoor grows. However, we do, I guess we would call it greenhouses are kind of like assisted light. We do, however, allow home cultivation. So if you are a medical cannabis patient in the state of Hawaii and you have a registered grow site, you can grow up to 10 plants and you can put them in your backyard, of course, away from view, plant them in the ground, have them in pots. And you know, Hawaii's got an amazing climate, I think, for growing cannabis. I'm gonna say we're parallel to Northern California, but in some ways we are. And but we definitely, each island has a different a climate, which is very interesting. So we see different parts of different islands, you know, producing, you know, some really good cannabis if, you know, their home grows. And then, you know, we have lots of natural resources. You can do, you know, solar, and we have, you know, water streams, you know, if you have clean streams and access to water. So yeah, that's how it works here.
So, see, Alex.
Yeah, we got outdoor farms here in Massachusetts. Obviously, the difference between growing indoor and outdoor is a business decision, right? You're going to have one, generally speaking, one crop a year versus, I don't know, three or four, depending on how many times you can flip a room, how many hoop houses you have, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, far less frequent though, I found here in Massachusetts. You know, maybe that's
Mm.
because land's more expensive. Maybe that's because it's just colder out here, climate, region. Um, but I've been to a handful, just a handful, but way more indoor, way more indoor.
I would imagine it's like you said, though, your cultivation kind of dwindles based on, you know, at least Hawaii's got a little bit more consistent temperatures and weather, even though it does change. But Oklahoma has both. You can also, like Alexis said, if you're a patient, you can have your plants. I don't, I think people are a little bit more paranoid about it. There's no sharing in Oklahoma of any kind, no gifting, no anything. So I think people are a little bit more apprehensive of their home grows, and they do treat it a little bit more, at least the people I've interfaced with kind of seem to treat it a little bit more, almost like a legacy concept, like, oh, I'm going to hide it back here and blend it in with these bushes. And it's not quite as open. I also, I've spent most of my life in Minnesota, and Minnesota is kind of does allow both as well. And we have an even shorter growing season, similar to, you know, climate wise, probably with Alex. And I don't hear as much about home grow in outdoors. I think a lot of people are still kind of hiding a little bit more. Um, I mean, I knew I grew last year and it was loud and proud with 10-foot plants, but you know, I realized that I was also making a claim. So, but Oklahoma does allow for both. So does Minnesota allow for both. I think it just really depends on how much control you want and how much you want to produce. You know, do you want to say that you're growing sun grown, you know, with nature, that you're a regenerative farmer and that's your thing and you can kind of stand on that? Or do you, like Alex said, how often you want to flip product? You know, are you doing an auto just to kind of clean the house with 4 other flips? So.
Excellent. Thank you for all of your participation. It is 8 o'clock now. I would like to wrap up with one more question if people are willing to indulge. I appreciate you all for joining us today. I know it's been an hour, but the last question, and this is more for focus on working with medical programs, and it's what are the misconceptions you find that medical providers have about cannabis, whether they are, working directly with cannabis or they are just a medical provider in any sense? What are these misconceptions you find to be kind of common?
I mean, I think the misconception that I see the most is that, that it's harmful, that it's got your Schedule I like definition, like high potential for abuse and no therapeutic value. However, what I have also seen is limitations surrounding the facility in which they work in, where when they're approached to, you engage with education with them, that they, in their previous life, they were a provider, a recommender, but now the healthcare system that they're under currently has a no tolerance. And so again, that's their medical degree, they're clinicians, and that's their paycheck. So they're gonna stick with what they know and they feel most comfortable with. Yeah, that's what I've seen. I could probably list a few more, but that would be the two, I guess, like the two tops that I see of these misconceptions.
Makes sense. Alex, I know you don't work with medical providers directly, but if you've come across any misconceptions you'd like to share.
As far as misconceptions with medical providers, I have absolutely no experience in those conversations. I'm gonna sit this one out and leave it to the experts.
Totally valid. Alicia,
Yeah.
take us home.
I have a lot. I have a lot of comments that it's not real medicine. I'm kind of intrigued. I've kind of read some stuff. I've had some anecdotal real world patients come forward. Maybe it's valid, but how do I incorporate that in? And is that really safe? They don't have the time or the education to really study up on it. On top of, a rheumatologist, you want them to at least know that work, right? I mean, and they are thinking, well, this is a whole nother specialty that I have to incorporate, and I don't know. So I think a lot of them are kind of really gun shy to be able to say, okay, let's do it. This works. And even some that I know certify, will certify because they think that it sounds like it's a valid reason based on the guidelines of their state, but they don't know anything else beyond that. They'll just do the paperwork, and then they're going to send you to what they hope to be a semi-experienced person, at least to a dispensary or to some other resource. And then that person will help you, and then they wash their hands of it. So it's not really incorporated into a medical provider-patient relationship. On top of, I do have a lot of, I have run into people, and I was absolutely shocked, but it was exactly like Alexis said. There are two huge systems in Oklahoma that are religious based, and it is an absolute no tolerance. They are not able to recommend it, even though, like I said, there were no obstructions to them doing so. They could really just kind of write the form out and send it in. And it was really just based on, were they going to be truthful or not? But absolutely, they'd be putting their paychecks at risk. And I will be honest, I was quite shocked by that. I shouldn't say I was quite shocked. I wasn't shocked. I was just really disappointed, I guess, more than anything.
It is rather disappointing, for sure. With that, I think we're going to conclude tonight's panel. I want to thank each of our participants for taking the time to speak with us, answer our questions. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. To everyone in the audience, thank you for showing up. We always appreciate having people to engage with us and join in our events. If you would like to become more involved in ACS, we do still have the links in the chat. You can join as a member. You're welcome to donate to us too as well, so we can keep putting on these free events, as we would really, really like to. And if you want to reach out to us, the email address in the chat, info@cannabisspecialist.org. Feel free to reach out about your membership, or for any other reason, contact us, especially students too. We do have a student program. Sarah Niram here in the chat. She's the person to talk to about that. And with that, I'd like to say goodnight and thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, McKenna. Thanks for hosting this.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.